Sorry, delayed.
All right, welcome to the June FRAD meeting. We'll start with the approval of the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda? And is there a second?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion before we approve the agenda or comments? All right, great. And the agenda is approved. Next, we have future board items and tours. This item will be presented by our Director of Parks and Recreation, who tonight filling in for is Scott. And he will highlight upcoming board activities. And as a reminder, this is also where members of the PRAB can suggest items to be considered for scheduling at the next agenda setting meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of PRAB. I'm Scott Schoenberg. I'm the Deputy Director. Allie is out of town and had asked me to fill in tonight. So I will do my best to share as much information with you as I can. We obviously have a full agenda for tonight, and then next month we're going to continue our conversation about the budget. That's probably going to be our biggest talking point tonight, is what's happening not only within our department but across the city. And so Jackson and Stacy are here to share more information tonight. They will also be back in July to give you one more look at the budget as well as the CIP. And Mark Davidson will be sharing information tonight and next month as well. Our hope is next month we're also going to cover Primos Park and schematic design, as well as the future of rec center needs assessment. And I'm sure we'll have more information coming up about the long-term financial strategy for the city. If you're not aware, City Council will be meeting this Thursday night to talk about preliminary polling results and kind of next steps as to what they hope to do this coming fall. Then in August, we're going to be doing our annual tour. We always do that in August, and this year we're planning on North Boulder Park, Tom Watson, and then also a tour of the civic area. Mark and his team will be sharing information and presenting along the way. So it'll be a great opportunity to see the sites and check things out a little bit. Later on in September, we'll have some information for you as we wrap up our summer programming and keep you up to speed on how the summer went. Fortunately, we are fully staffed and rolling right now, which is really exciting. A lot of good things happening. And then for that meeting, we'll talk a little bit more about the East Boulder Community Center and some of those schematic designs as well in September. So I think that's it for right now. Yeah.
All right, wonderful, thank you. Next up, we have public participation. This portion of the meeting is for members of the public to communicate ideas or concerns to the board regarding parks and recreation issues for which a public hearing is not scheduled for later in this meeting. Tonight, we have one person online for public participation. Is that right, Clarissa?
Yes.
During the public participation time, the public is encouraged to comment on the need for parks and recreation programs and facilities as they perceive them. All speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Depending on the nature of your matter, you may or may not receive a response from the board after you deliver your comments. The board is always listening and appreciative of community feedback. Clarissa, will you please present the additional guidelines, and then you can call on our first speaker?
Yes. So we will do the short version. You can see the long version in the slides. So all remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. Participants are required to sign up to speak in advance and use the name they are commonly known by. Individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. And as a reminder, you will have 3 minutes. In just a moment, Lynn, let me get you set up here.
I was just wondering why you're the only board that requires someone to sign up ahead of time. I mean, there's like 30 boards. What makes you so special? I do not get it. You know, and do you have people overcrowding you? Like there's one person today. Like, is that inviting to the public? No, it's not. It's like so obvious. Like, why do you do that? What possible reason could you have for doing that? I asked. I wasn't answered. Great. Anyway, I'm fed up with all the impact of the homeless in, all my park areas. Like the creek is just disgusting with litter and garbage and who knows what. And, what you need to do is go on strike because guess what? You can't do your job of providing services to the public for recreation because the planning board largely is the one who is undermining your every effort with subsidies for every single development. You blink and you will not believe what you're going to see coming up in Boulder. And it's high end, a lot of high end. For every high end place that they propose, there's, 20 affordable housing needs created for that one thing. And then there's more homeless. And then there's less appreciation of the public for the spaces that we're supposed to have desirable in Boulder, all these public spaces. And the South Boulder Rec Center, oh, no money for it. Well, I wonder why. And we're deficit like $10 million now. There's a hiring freeze. And we're supposed to take care of this population of 40,000 more people in this area, more than that probably, with the planning reserve, with South Boulder CU campus, with, National Geographic, the little town that they built there on Iris and 30th, east of 30th, with, Weather Vane, with all of these developments coming up every instant, more and more and more people to accommodate for our public park spaces. What are you going to do to this? You're waiting to talk about the budget. The budget is here and now. The CIP is here and now. What are you doing about it? You're sitting there on your duffs reacting to planning board, giving away subsidies like there's no tomorrow. Height limits, expansions in every direction. Just stop and tell them you can't do their job. You can't do your job with them doing their job the way they're.
That's been 3 minutes. Thank you for sharing, Lynn.
All right, is there anybody else on line? No. All right, thank you for, Lynn, for your comments. Since there are no other community members who would like to speak tonight, I'll now close public comment. Would any of the board members or staff like to respond to Kevin's comments?
First.
Staff?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that we have reached out to the city clerk's office regarding the process and the requirement of signing up for public comments before meetings. I know we do take folks in person and allow them to sign up at that time. And so we will ensure that our process aligns with other boards, committees throughout the organization. So I will look at that. As far as Lynn's comments regarding the homeless, we do have a wonderful working relationship with our SAMS team and all we can at this point to ensure our park spaces are active and available and safe for friends and family and gatherings. And so we're going to continue to work towards that. But I don't have a direct answer or solution at this point.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from 5/19? Thank you. Would anybody like to second the motion? Great, thank you. All right. Are there any questions or any discussion on the consent agenda? I would like to just briefly talk through, I have two questions. Pearl Street renovation is on the list, under the planning with a start date of 2026. I don't recall seeing any plans on that.
So the project is currently in the scoping, so it hasn't begun yet.
Okay.
So we just get, like, we call it a job that we put together. And then, once we get that in place and make the decision.
Okay,
So it's still sort of in the pipeline.
so it's the project, is like the whole thing will kick off.
Exactly,
Okay.
so it's still scoping.
And another thing I wanted to mention, was the, civic area pop-up that's listed in the, consent agenda. Rob and I were there, and it was so lovely. It was a really nice pop-up, and I wanted to mention, if Scott, if you could talk to me about how you worked with forestry to kind of create a cost savings, I thought that was kind of fascinating. Did anybody have a chance to visit the pop-up at civic area?
So I was able to, I was there for the farmers market, so I had a great view, I was sitting with my friends, and everyone had a comment on it too, which was kind of cool to see. And a lot of my friends, before I even got there, they had read the sign, so they actually were aware about how, you know, no trees have been cut down to make this pop up. So I think it was cool to just see how, you know, there was like so much engagement. I mean, this is not even during the event. This is just, you know, Saturday farmers market. Tons of engagement, tons of kids playing on it. And I also saw just like adults sitting on the logs in the shade too. So and it was just kind of cool to see this different.
And I don't want to steal Mark's thunder. So Mark and his team, not only collaborated with our forestry team, but also with CU, and the students at CU, which is really cool. So Mark, why don't you share a little bit more?
I appreciate it, Scott. It's a good project. There's a lot of collaboration going on. The CU students, which we take. CU class. We then, this is actually our second project of this nature, Crestview Outdoor Classroom Experiment. So we're partnering with our forestry department, obviously, as we come out of the city, we say a tree, we say a tree, we chop it down. It goes in and it's, you know, wood chips after that. So we spoke to them about specifying potential trees from each place. And so we've been sort of specking these trees, putting them in more visible. And then as we advance the projects forward, we're able to do amazing house construction. So we had a couple of consultants tell us, for instance, Crestview was somewhere between 150 to 200,000. And excluding in-house labor costs, the total project. We think we're improving the way kids can play and adults can hang out. It's still, it's all in prototype mode still. Which is why it's powerful. But we do a few people say you're not moving this before. So it's nice.
I want to stay in civic area.
And we spoke to OSCP, for which is not. Actually got great. Future ahead of it.
Thank you so much. It was really special. to be there. I can't, even my 15-year-old is like, that's cool. So,
That's nice.
how did there was some, I want to say polling, but you know, how did that come out?
We're still processing the engagement results.
Okay.
In fact, we've got two fabulous interns working today. Looking for the county services and so we'll be bringing that back. Called,
That's listed in here as there's a date and a place for that, right?
yeah, and actually one of the two early to do this, like, I don't probably do it. So far, it's been pretty cool.
Can we get, if that, I just don't know if it's in my calendar, but if,
So July 14th,
Okay.
from 5:30 to 7:30 PM, you're all invited. There's the concert, which will be Jeff and Paige again, singing and engaging with kids. But there'll be an excellent opportunity to just, provide feedback and just, it's another open house. So I probably should have mentioned that in the future board items and events, but, yeah, that'll be coming up on the 14th of July, so.
All right, any other comments on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I had a question about the budget realignment for South Boulder Rec Center. So I understand it came from, or according to this, came from the Pleasant View Access project. So is that project going to be continued at some time in the future?
Sure, so, we often have to shuffle money around a little bit, Jackson. I don't know if you can explain a little bit more detail.
We're still figuring it out, to be totally transparent. This was something that came up with a conversation with facilities, our South Boulder Rec Center team and city manager's office. The desire was, they have contractors ready to go this summer that will prolong the life cycle of that building. So by shifting money from Pleasant View, which was a project that the planning team did not have capacity to address this year, we're able to really shift the money to the highest and best use.
Sure.
The ask is that we request that money again in the future when we have the staff capacity and ability to manage that project.
Is there a time period for that? Because I think that project is what, 24?
I think we're gonna have to continue to look at all of our projects, and we'll talk about that more tonight as we align kind of CIP. The other thing I'll say about Pleasant View is, and we have had, several complaints about parking or lack of parking and access and whatnot. And so unfortunately, that project budget was so underfunded that it wasn't, when we do projects, we want to do them the right way. And we felt like this was, until we had enough resources to do Pleasant View holistically in the right way, it made more sense to utilize these dollars right now to keep the South Boulder Rec Center open.
Okay, thanks.
All right, is based on the discussion, does the motion and the second still stand? All those approved? Anybody opposed? All right, then consent agenda is approved. Action items, we have no action items tonight. So we will move on then to matters for discussion.
So I'll introduce this and then I'll be handing it over to Jackson to take over and share his presentation. And what I will say, it's been an interesting couple of weeks. You all received an email from me. Ally went on vacation, and shortly thereafter, the city decided to implement a hiring freeze, and then also ask every department to save money throughout the rest of this year. What we have been told, and Lynn referred to it in her comments, is that the city is looking at about a $10 million shortfall this year in operating dollars. And so all departments are kind of sharpening the pencil and keeping things a little bit tighter, which I think is fine. And then we're also going to look into that for next year and figure out what makes the most sense. I will say we have an incredible business services team. Stacy and Jackson just do a phenomenal job in making things work. And they've already done the first share of what's happening with the budget process. Ally will be back in the office later this week, and then we will be submitting a list of potential reductions in budget for this year as well as next year. That could be considered by City Council. And Jackson will talk a little bit more about this, but I will preference his presentation by saying we are not the sole decision makers in this. We want to be as transparent through the process. Ally needs to come in, but ultimately the city manager's office will make the decision as to what program services and where those reductions occur based on the impact. So I've already had questions like, are you going to be shutting down the South Boulder Rec Center? Or, those kind of decisions are huge impact to the community. And I think that's something that the city manager's office will look at. And not that particular item in person, we're not going to propose that one, but we've got a whole list. Jackson will share some of that tonight, and we'll vet it later this week and kind of go from there. But you'll also be getting the update in July. So we'll answer what we can this evening. And Jackson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scott. Jackson Height Business Services Manager, as Scott mentions, this was quite the pivot. We had a memo that Ally had reviewed before she left that talked about enhancements and a totally different direction. And 5 business days ago, we got some different news. So thank you for your understanding. I think that we are trying to be as transparent with you as possible and share what we know. There's a lot of work that's still going on behind the scenes that we will highlight with you next month. This is really just a brainstorming session that we've had with our senior managers at this point, and I wish there was more information we had at your fingertips or when the packet is published, but we've been scrambling. So just as a reminder, PROB's focus within the charter is to provide input on the budget process. Typically, that's for the future year. Just because we are talking about 25 service level reductions, we will be talking about that as well. Next month, we will be coming back to you asking for your recommendation of the operating budget, and then we will need your approval of any appropriations out of the permanent park and recreation fund. That's called out directly in the charter. We have historically done that is only for the current year, but you're approving the CIP budget in its whole over the course of the 6 hours. As a reminder, the operating budget is what pays for salaries and expenses on a regular basis. The capital budget is anything that has a useful life of over 5 years and $50,000. So that's really how we differentiate them. Tonight, we're just going to go over the budget timeline, what we thought we were doing when we first started talking to you, an update on the 25 budget situation. We'll talk about a few policy and some membership structure changes that are being proposed, and then we'll get into our CIP. So you've seen this timeline before. The blue flags on top represent the different milestones. The top half of the page is really what the PROB's engagement is, whereas the bottom half is what we are working on as staff internally with not just our department, but the finance department, the city manager's office. There's an executive budget team, and then ultimately everything that gets packaged up goes to planning board for the CIP review, and then city council for formal approval and adoption of the budget. I think you're familiar with the timeline. I'm not going to go into too much in depth, but our intention next month is to come back and ask for your approval on the budget. I know this is very difficult. We expected to have draft numbers to share with you tonight, but just given the news that we've gotten in the last 5 days, we do not have any draft numbers to share with you. I think that we have a general baseline as far as what our 2025 budget is and what a 5% reduction is, that we will look at that as kind of a baseline target that our expected 26 budget would probably look like. So this is our typical budget process. We're in year 4 of budgeting for equity and resilience, where we kind of started with last year for the 25 approved budget. We do some realignments, we do some enhancements. This year, we should really update that to do proposed reductions just to meet the city's goals. Ultimately, what we're looking at tonight is the capital investment program and what would have been the department budget. Obviously, we don't have that in front of you tonight, so some grace and understanding as we navigate this is appreciated. I think that Scott had forwarded you the press release from the city, and then you also did give information in the packet, but ultimately this is coming down to the slowdown of different revenue sources. Sales tax accounts for over 50% of the city's general fund revenue. We do have a dedicated 0.25 cent sales tax fund that supports park operations, as well as our other programming. And then property tax, there has been some legislative changes. And then after years of double-digit growth, there is a no growth to slight decline, as well as some legislative changes that impacts the amount that cities receive. Just as a reminder, over 50% of all property tax bills go to supporting county operations as well as the school district. So the amount that the city receives is actually very small out of the property tax that is paid. We do have a $5 to $10 million shortfall expected across the organization, and then you all are aware that we do have increased cost escalation and just pressures on all of the expenses that not just the departments making, but the city as a whole is making. So with that, we have provided some numbers as far as what this means for our revenue projections. In the sales tax, there's kind of a big decline expected in 25 and 26. That situation improves after what's being dubbed a mini recession in 27. Ultimately, this is about a $1.2 million decline in the sales tax we would expect to the 0.25 cent sales tax fund. On the property tax side, this is where the bigger decline is seen. You can see we're expecting a loss of almost $500,000 a year, or almost $2.5 million total. This is about an 8% decline from the forecast that we last shared with you. So obviously a big point. And what I do want to call out is the 5% reduction is really identified as a moving target. Because we have so many different dedicated funds across the city, there are certain expenses that are allowed in certain areas. When we see an 8% decrease in the Perm Parks Fund, we may need to increase our expenses in that fund more. But we have the flexibility to shift CIP across funds. There's the ability to look at, the city has 41 different funds with how everything's structured and what's paying for what it's so legally permissible. This slide is really a repeat. The federal uncertainty changes every day. This impacts us directly and indirectly. Tariffs are a big concern, especially on our fleet purchases, as well as all of our capital projects. Mark will tell you that we have contractors scared to give us a cost estimate anymore just because the prices are changing so drastically. The long-term financial strategy, as Scott mentioned, on Thursday night at City Council, they will be sharing some preliminary results on the polling for different ballot measures. The 3 ballot measures that were polled were the extension of the community culture, resilience, and safety tax with no sunset, continuing that through 2050, and then changing the permanent parks and recreation fund to the public realm tax. So definitely a lot of interest. I would encourage you to listen in. The pollster who ran this poll will be on the call, as well as several council members who have already heard the results. I'm not going to get more into the long-term financial strategy. I think you've all heard about it. This is an opportunity for the city to look at revenues, look at the dedicated funds, and increase some flexibility with how funds can be used across the entire organization, not just tied to one department or one fund. Something else that has changed since we came to you last month is our cost allocation costs have increased substantially. Cost allocation is what we pay to support other internal service departments. This is our IT services, so our network and security team, our city attorney's office that provides us legal counsel, our finance department that's helping with budget projections, accounting, payroll, and then all of our HR functions. These are important functions that the city has to pay regardless, and cost allocation basically divvies that up to different departments and different funds for their proportional share that they are relying on those services. I will say that these increases are significantly higher than we expected, but looking into the methodology and calculation, there really isn't much we can argue back against here. They are services that we are receiving, and we are very grateful to be part of the city organization as a whole.
When did the change happen with the cost allocation?
That's a complex question. I think on about the 5th of the month is when we got the updated numbers. There's a lot more history to it. We've gone through different vendors. This vendor consultant was selected in 23. They did the 24 and 25 cost allocation. This is the first time that it's been done in-house with staff, but the methodology is the exact same. How many employees did you hire? How many items went to city council? How many boards are we supporting? There's about 200 different items. I'm not going to go into detail. We went through line by line, and we have a lot more money.
That was over 40%.
It was 40% increase in the 0.25 and probably no, I'm sorry, it was 41% in one fund, 46% in the other. I don't have it memorized, so I'm sorry. And just to be transparent, we are not the only department dealing with this. Open Space and Mountain Park saw their cost allocation increase by about 50%. This was shared with their board last week. Transportation's costs have increased as well, so I think there's definitely some concern on the staff side that it is increasing as we are looking for budget reductions, that we did look at it very closely. I will just pause here. I've unloaded a lot of information already. Are there any other questions at this point?
Anybody else?
Okay, so the right-hand table really indicates the highlights from the press release that went out 2 Fridays ago. What we were tasked with as a department is to identify a 5% reduction in 2025 approved budget, limit the community impact, which I think is incredibly important. We do want to continue to provide good services. I think the message we've received from executive budget team is they don't want us to just take 5% out of each work group's budget and call it good. They would rather see targeted approach where it's 10% in one area, 0% in another. And that way we are continuing to serve the community for the highest and best use of the dollars. We do have the department plan that was approved in 2022. It is statistically valid. That is really what drives most of our decision making. Later on that we throw in a factor of equity, who's impacted, and we'll be considering that as we move forward.
Jackson, I think you may want to also mention, one of the things that we're looking at is costs that are ongoing expenses versus just the one-time cost. It's, it would be easy to save, or easier to save some money if we just said we're not going to do a Pro Street or we're not going to do a particular project. But I don't think that provides a permanent solution, and we don't want to just, so we want to be very, very intentional about what we're looking at. And we also have a lot of our programs that have to generate revenue. And so our department is much more complex than the majority of other departments because we are so dependent on creating the dollars. So for example, you take a program like gymnastics, and while it may not be essential to the community, it actually makes money and helps supplement our other programs and services. So this is where it gets a little bit more complex in Parks and Rec than maybe some other departments.
Thank you, Scott. Great
So
call.
is increasing revenue, does that count towards the 5% budget reduction?
I think the hard part is we're very focused on 2025 reductions. We are halfway through our season. We have earned a whole lot of revenue compared to last year. Just for comparison, the RAF is earned revenue is up over $700,000 compared to this point last year. So we are doing phenomenal on the business side of things. I think the difficult part of the city's trying to manage is how do you treat every department equitably, but recognize that different departments have different operating structures, different revenue sources, different expenses that they can change or can't change. Looking around the room, we went through COVID together, and the reductions we were asked to do during COVID were far more substantial than this. But I think we have a lot of lessons learned as far as what didn't go well. We don't lay off 200 lifeguards and expect to have lifeguards back the next summer. But we are trying to be very thoughtful and strategic in how we do this.
How do you think the revenues are so much this year?
Participation, gymnastics is going up, golf course is going up.
That's on the southern covered, to preview and this. People are coming in, people are taking our programs. Yes.
And I think we have also been very strategic in everything that we have brought back. We are making sure is meeting, class sizes, has a solid business plan in place. Any position that we brought back after pandemic layoffs, we did need to basically have cost recovery plus. That there has been a strong emphasis on clear business plans for the gymnastics program, the golf course, just to name the two easy ones. All right, so I will caveat this. This is the blanket 5% reduction if we were looking at it across funds and across the department. As I mentioned, our property tax could be decreasing 8%, but we may need to find additional decreases there. But there is some flexibility in how we structure our capital expenses as well as our operating expenses. That ultimately we are looking at a $2.2 million number to come up with. I want to.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This, I should have asked this before, guys, once you know my salary. And this may be a stupid question, but why are the property tax revenues down 8%? Because everyone's paying more property taxes.
Yes.
So I don't understand.
That's a great question. Last year in the legislative cycle, there was a bill introduced at the state that basically shifted some of the local property taxes back to the state to reduce property taxes in out years. So you will see that reduction in 2026. The other thing is our previous forecast had assumed 5 to 8% growth in property values over the next 6 years. What they found is the reassessment between, let's figure this out, 23 and 25 was flat at 0%. But they are taking a much more conservative approach that I want to say between 2012 and 2025, it was something like a 12% increase every reassessment cycle, which is every 2 years. And obviously that's not very sustainable or realistic. And then seeing a cooling of the real estate market, because the reassessment is done on the value of the property on June 30th of the current year. Yes. All good. So 2.2 million is basically what we're looking at for reduction across the department. As Scott mentioned, the more we can find an ongoing funding as opposed to just saying we're not doing a CIP project is beneficial because of the impacts that we have on both the revenue side and expense side in the out years. The numbers that we came up with in reductions during the pandemic, I believe we're closer to 5 to 6 million. So I don't want to say this sounds easy, but finding $2 million in reductions is very palatable and something that I think we can do. So this is really kind of how we've categorized what we're doing to evaluate where the reductions will come from. Personnel is one of our biggest category. About 40% of our operating budget goes to paying for our staffing. There was a city manager initiated hiring freeze for all positions across the organization. We're still updating accurate numbers because we did have a few job offers in progress, as well as a few planned retirements or vacancies. But as of this morning, we had 148 positions filled. We do have about 170 positions that equate to 153 FTE. We have a lot of staff with 0.5 FTE, 0.75 FTE, just because that works for our business. 0.5 FTE just means that they work 20 hours a week, 0.75 means they work 30 hours a week. So when the hiring freeze came out, we had about 20 vacancies across the department. We will provide you updated numbers next month and exactly what those positions are. It is everything from a 10-hour-a-week lifeguard, professional lifeguard, aquatic facility lead, we'll use their professional title, to Mark's team has a vacancy or 2 on it that you'll hear more about. So those are really the types of positions that were impacted across the organization. And they also put an immediate freeze on our non-standard employees. So our seasonal, varied and temporary staff that provide a lot of our programming and frontline customer service delivery. We are at 540 employees in that category. We typically cap out at about 550. So this was actually optimal timing that we had a very successful summer recruitment campaign. Our goal now is how do we retain those employees and make sure that they stay with us. So that is something that you'll hear about as we move forward. And then with that, we are looking at how we're staffing. If the outdoor pools are closed, we aren't going to have 20 lifeguards sitting around on the deck. We are going to have the minimum number of people it takes to operate those facilities. Similar with camps, we are going to make sure that our staffing ratios are aligned, but we aren't staffing extra just in case something happens. I think that Scott and I and Alex, you were here, would continue to reiterate employees are the greatest asset of the organization. We really believe that, and we don't want there to be any layoffs or impacts to employees. So we're hoping that this freeze really lets us right size and stabilize and see what's to come. Is there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I agree with you, and I was really very happy to hear from Mark Wolf, who Ally reports up to, and Maria, our city manager, that they are all about focus on employees and our retention and taking care of the people that we have. And so citywide, I think that is going to continue to be the priority. My big concern is Megan and her team, like for example, in aquatics, if every summer we have lifeguards that work a few weeks and decide to quit, or family vacations or whatnot, and that can be impactful for things like pool hours. Megan and her team are going to do the best they can to shift things around. We also often have vacancies with some of our fitness instructors or different classes and formats. And so we know we have some dance programs coming up this fall that people are registered for, and we don't have staff yet to fill them. So you may see some things that, we need to cancel some classes just based on not having the ability to hire those positions. And they're really not necessarily essential positions. And when Ally gets back, we'll look at the full list. As Jackson said, you know, this ranges from senior landscape architects all the way down to lifeguards, and everything in between. And so we're gonna be very intentional about what makes sense to request from the city manager's office for an exemption for those critical positions, but that will be Ally's decision based on the impacts that we put together on what it is. And those impacts include the revenue, certainly, because our dance programs, they don't, you know, we actually make money off of those too. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to cancel that, but we're in alignment with the rest of the city on the hiring freeze, and we're still waiting for some answers on that.
Generally, the vacancies we have, if we hold them for the remainder of this year, we're looking at 600 to 800,000 savings. So when we're trying to get to our goal of 2.2 million, that is almost a third of the way there. But it definitely hurts, and we don't want other staff to pick up additional workload for those vacancies, that there will be some service level impact to the community to maintain staff sanity and personal well-being. But we really are trying to minimize it.
Is that net of the revenue that some of those positions would create?
Correct. That's also factoring in a reserve on them, just because we have to pay reserves on our operating budget. Very back at the napkin map, we're still having some changes, so we'll provide you an update next month.
So what is the process for asking for exemptions?
So that's still to be determined. Nuria met with all city employees in the town hall last week and talked a little bit about that. And she said that, you know, those positions that are critical to ongoing operations of the city would be looked at on a case-by-case basis, very stringently. And that would be her and the city manager's office reviewing those. The requests, I believe there will be some type of a form or document that will be coming to us that we can utilize. And all requests would have to come directly from Ally to the city manager's office, but I don't think we've got any clarity on that quite yet.
So on that same point, there's no process in place for this situation? Like, we don't have a priority of employees?
You know,
Not that anybody's more important, you know, but like,
it's
as far as-
very interesting. So during the pandemic, I think we learned a lot. Things like using the term essential, right? What employees are essential versus, you know, critical to the organization and what's ongoing. And I think there's a lot to be determined, and it is going to be case by case, and directors are going to be asked to really limit what they're requesting. So while it may make sense, I think there's a strong desire from the city manager's office for us to really look at changing our service levels. Because since the pandemic, we have grown as an organization, both BPR, but also the city as a whole with quite a few FTE. And so I think there's a desire to really limit that.
I'm thinking of it more like police, you know, like, then that would be essential, right? So
Sure.
you're just trying not to create a hierarchy, basically, and look at it from a different perspective.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's not a hierarchy, but maintaining what the critical services are that are necessary. Wastewater treatment operator is going to be filled. You all want safe drinking water. We all want safe drinking water. Police and fire will likely be prioritized higher than the dance instructor. And I hate to say that, but
Yeah. Understood.
it's looking at the organization as a whole and what the funding allows, what's needed. And I think we shared it with you last month that the organization as a whole has increased over 150 FTE since pandemic close. And I believe there's about 80 positions vacant when the increase was implemented, but we still are an increased service level compared to.
So 80 positions, 1,500 employees, 80 positions, including the 20 in Parks and Rec.
Correct. And we had a handful of positions that were in the interview process where we were allowed to proceed and make job offers that I'm incredibly grateful for it. I know some of our team members are grateful for it. Some of it was just musical chairs that we had a staff go from one work group to another. We stole some employees from other departments. we'll probably lose some employees to those departments. Yeah. All right, so I've talked enough about personnel. Non-personnel is the other big portion of our budget in terms of operating. This is what we use for materials, supplies, equipment. We're going through and looking at what hasn't been spent year over year, and really where can we do small decreases that don't impact service levels significantly. This isn't going to amount to a lot of money in an individual line item, but collectively, this will probably be in the 6 figures and helps get us towards that $2.2 million goal. What we are doing is we are going through very methodically and looking at the last 2 years' actuals, what was submitted for budget this year. Are people really spending the budget that was given to them? If there's vacancies on a team, what does that mean for their ability to spend on anything from uniforms to the vendor or contractor that is going to support X, Y, or Z site? So that's the other area we're looking at. And then with our CIP, we're really looking at the amount that we have in current workload and capacity, as well as budget that has continued to carry forward. To not put more on the planning team's plate. Mark will be very humble about this, but he has a lot of vacancies on his team that we really are trying to figure that out of aligning budgets, staff capacity, and how we can continue to deliver on the projects that have been shared and promised with you. So I think what you'll hear next month is there are probably 3 or 4 projects where we will push them out a year or decrease the funding just because there isn't the staff capacity. We have millions of dollars of projects that still need to be fully spent before we really dive into anything.
You've got a big month ahead of you guys.
It's been a busy 5 days
Yeah.
and we've got a
I think what
Busy
Jackie
week.
says, we got some good practicing during COVID.
Yeah.
so it's-
Yeah.
So I think we don't want to impact projects that are currently under contract. We've already entered into contracts with consultants. There's obligations we have as an organization to adhere to. We have shared with the community what's moving forward. Not that it would be the case, but I'll pick on Pearl Street Mall because we don't have a consultant there. Is that a project that we push out 2 quarters? That is very unlikely just given the political nature of it. That is the backbone of the community. But given that was talked about earlier, is an easy example. All right, we got through 25 budget reductions. I don't have numbers for you. I have ballpark numbers for you, but we'll just pause real here quick and see what questions you have.
Since you guys have had this experience with COVID, is it possible to get the operating budget for the CIP from COVID moving forward, just to see how it was handled, the reallocations?
We can share that with you. I think the hard part is we've seen so much escalation in our revenue and our expenses. When COVID started, we were at a $35 million a year budget. We're at a $45 million a year budget now. We can really identify where we have those reductions. I will be very candid and say the COVID reductions were focused much more on services we could deliver safely to the community. That people weren't coming into rec centers to do one-on-one personal training. People really didn't feel comfortable using the pool. That most of our reductions at that time were on the recreation operations side of things. And that's where we saw such a huge decline in our revenue as well. So
Yeah.
we can definitely provide that for you next month. I just want to preface it that it's not
No,
truly
that makes total
apples to
sense.
apples.
It's more of a high level.
Yeah, I think also when we talk about CIP and the cost of projects, Mark can probably talk about the escalation of how much more expensive things are today to build or do any construction than 2019. And so looking at those numbers from 5+ years ago, it's just hard to apples to apples at this point.
It's not even the numbers, it's the, it's what was cut and why. And I know it was different then. We've got a pandemic going on.
I think a lot of it, Route 2 was deferred, so we had Flatirons Golf Course coming online, right? That project was in the queue, ready to go, then COVID hit. So a lot of that got, paused. Obviously, that project was done, but because it was so severe during COVID, little different situation.
Yeah.
But
Kind of like just to put things on a positive level when it comes to budget, is there a way for you to, do you have like a matrix that shows all of the projects in the SIP since 2015 that were completed? Like, is there something that can show, like, that we can get super excited about, like, look at everything that we've done? I don't know, does that make sense?
Mark, it's the dessert tonight. You're gonna hear all about Tom Watson, so.
Okay. Well, Tom Watson, that's coming
Coming
up
up.
now, but I mean, stuff that like has been, I guess the golf course and, you know, the reservoir building, like, those are big ones, but even just smaller SIP projects that have gone through the process and been completed, I would love to.
Since I got the, two, Jackson, and I said, it's been tracking kind of properly ever since then, so we can definitely find that information and then look back a little bit at some of the stuff. But during COVID, those both, the client team at that point was down with 2 people, so there was also like a pile of money built up to build up the team and get through COVID. So it's not like, you keep saying it's not like that.
Rob, can I rephrase your question? Would it be beneficial to show you what services have been introduced or brought back since COVID, as opposed to what was cut during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, that would be helpful. I'm just looking at more of a high level, and I understand that some of it is because just people couldn't be social.
I guess maybe the question can be more like, just would love to hear a little bit more about some of the learnings that came out of the pandemic that we can actually apply in this situation where we're cutting budget. And I'm sure that's actually what's coming, but if there's anything that you could share now, would love to hear it.
My biggest one, don't lay off 300 employees in the same day. And I think I speak very candidly for our entire team.
Yeah, I think people are huge, and I wasn't here in Boulder at the time, but the organization I worked for went through that same thing and had to terminate several hundred employees in one day, and that was pretty rough. I will say that when COVID hit, everything paused, and we were very, very strategic as to what came back and when it came back, and to what extent it came back. And so we do really focus on revenue generation and impact on the community. We have some programs like our YSI and Expand program that are serving a population that is maybe doesn't have other resources, that's huge for us. And then we have gymnastics, dance, and the programs that make a lot of money. Right now, we're working on our community access framework that you'll hear more about, which would include our rentals, our park spaces, and additional revenue generation. I think you asked a question earlier, why are we so far up on revenue so far this year in the RAF? And I think there is a multitude of reasons, but I think it's because we are so strategic with where we are focusing our current resources. And then we're doing phenomenal work with our marketing of our programs and services and whatnot as well. And so I do think that we operate pretty darn lean. We also have our 2022 DPR plan that guides the work and prioritizes the work. We have our recreation priority index and kind of our program plan that Megan has been working on with the committee as well. That helps us to understand where we should be prioritizing based on impact for the community.
It might be helpful too, just based on the questions I think tonight, since our time will be short, we'll just kind of get the information in July and we'll have the information. If there might just be a little extra explanation of why things decided, why they were cut, or if they were cut during COVID, this is how the community helped managed it, or like just any relatable information that might be able to help us understand why the decisions that are made would be, I think, very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can use common sense to extrapolate what's perfect and what's not, but like for me in particular, this is my 3rd PRAB meeting, so like, I just need some. It would be helpful for me to have that history.
Yeah. Just so we can better shape our answers to you, do you want just to COVID? Do you want back 10 years? I guess what's the most?
Just, I think back 10 years, and I can the uniqueness of COVID.
Okay. We should be able to pull this out very easily.
I love it. I'm not asking for it. Crazy.
By the penny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to overlook.
I also understand how much work is now under the, just given the recent decisions. So I don't want to make this into a bigger ask given all of the. So I think just at a very high level for us to understand.
Okay. We want you to be informed as you make your decisions, so we will get you as much of that high level information. Any other questions here? Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Stacy and Megan at this point. They're gonna talk through fee policy and membership structure.
Susan Huffman, Business Services. I'm going to kick off our fee policy discussion tonight, along with Megan Newman. Both been doing a lot of work on this, as well as a large number of staff within the organization. So we shared this fee policy alignment with you last month. This is really just a refresher slide for you. We are basing all of our work on our fee policy and schedule that was approved by the CRAB in 2023, put into effect for 2024. So it is really just updating that fee policy and schedule, and then looking at some areas that will get further updates, such as the golf course, or community access, and then also our court system plan, since that was finished in 2024, and that is going to help guide some recommendations. Again, just want to remind the CRAB that we are very committed to equitable access, and we really do look at our 2022 BPR plan as our guide. We do offer age-based discounts. We have our financial aid assistance program, and we do support individuals with disabilities. So we will be keeping all of that in mind as we do this work. And then this does fall into our 2026 budget development strategy, which we talked about with you last month.
Was the comprehensive fee policy, was that that was last year?
It went into effect 2024.
Into effect?
Yes.
We did vote on
approved it.
that, right?
CRAB approved it in July of 2023 to put into effect January 2024.
There's the fee policy, which guides all of the fees, and then we do publish a fee schedule every
Oh, it's the
January.
schedule.
You saw the
That was
schedule last year.
schedule.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
This slide we're not really going to go over. It was in your packet last month as well, but it just does remind you that we do categorize our program types and what that benefit level is, and then what our cost recovery targets are, and then just give some examples. So, and in the packet last month, but just as a reminder for this month. And then really, as we look at our pricing strategy for fee updates, I guess I'm just the reminder person tonight. All of this was presented last month, but really wanted to call out the market comparison. So in your CRAB packet for this month, we did receive a comprehensive market comparison that we just had finished up last month, just to make sure that we are constantly looking at our surrounding communities, both in the public and private sector, to see where we are falling in and then what they are offering. It is something that we're really been getting into the habit of doing every 6 months. We were presented to the CRAB the last one this past November, so we will do another one this fall. But that was in the package, and I know there was a lot of material there, so I can pause and see if there was any questions on that one.
I have a question about the chart that you had on the previous slide. Maybe we're gonna talk about this later, but, with the 5% reduction that we're having to make our choices on where the cuts are coming from, I had, just noted the programs that have the less cost recovery, the 10%, the 70%, 50%. Is that part of the analysis in terms of like targeting where the program services may not be? I'm assuming it is.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this a little bit. Yes, absolutely. You know, things like special events, obviously you'll see a 10% cost recovery or maybe slightly higher for things like So Much Fun or holiday lights. The other part of that is, while there may not be a cost recovery associated with holiday lights, there's safety things, that they impact safety, may impact sales revenue, and some other things. So we are looking at each one of our programs across the board. So everything that you see on here on the far right, we're taking a close look at, and we're identifying first the low-hanging fruit that we could potentially eliminate, or things that we think may not be necessary. And then what are the ramifications? What are the impacts if we do cut that? And
Right.
so, but certainly every one of these items, we're gonna take a close look at.
Yeah, and in terms of, you know, whatever the decisions are in the end, the messaging would be more around pausing potentially some of these, and while we're going through some of these harder times, I assume that's kind of.
Well, and what's really tricky about it is, a lot of times when you're seeing that lower cost recovery number, those are sometimes the most mission aligned things for us. And so we don't want to just cut those things because it's an easy way to save, right? Like that's sometimes where we need to make really hard decisions to help do things smarter or better so that we can meet our mission. Because that's what we're here to do first, right? And so while it'd be really easy to say, like, let's just cut anything that's not at 100% cost recovery, I think then we would be a private business and not
Right,
meeting
we
our
think about
our
values,
goals
that's
as, you know, as a public parks and rec agency, right?
I think the other side of it is there's certain areas where we are operating at 100% cost recovery, or the stated goal is 100% cost recovery. But we may not be meeting minimum class sizes. It may be a program that's seeing declining enrollment. Are we better off just doing a deep cut once to a program that's seeing those declines and has minimal community benefit? It really benefits the individual. That would be something we'd look at. Obviously, it decreases our revenue. It also decreases our expenses. That it is a careful consideration, but we have a lot of tools in place to help with that.
Right, and I guess and just in my mind, when I was looking at these numbers, just at a super high level, because I know these are really complicated, hard decisions that are having to be analyzed. I was thinking more along the lines of we're in extraordinary circumstances economically and just trying to figure out how do we balance potentially pausing some services, program services that do not have the greatest benefit to the whole community or the greater numbers of the community versus physical infrastructure, hard assets that have to be maintained and have to continue, or hubs like the rec centers to continue to keep those services up, and you know the deferred maintenance issues, the long-term expenses if we don't invest or continue to invest in those facilities. I know it's a balancing act, but that's kind of what was in my mind in terms of these hard decisions at the moment.
And our minds jumped right there with you. We heard about this 5 days ago
Right.
and said, what can we do? And if you look at like the very first one, open access, that's our parks. So can we reduce mowing in our parks and not mow as often, right? But then you have the balance of, well, how does that impact, you know, what potential wildfires?
Right.
So we're looking at everything across the board, and it's tough. And so at this point, it's kind of in the brainstorming phase. And then we'll hopefully be talking about that as internally with our staff and Ally on Thursday, and move forward a list to the city manager's office to analyze along with all the other items in the city.
When you're doing that work, I know Ally doesn't like when I talk about this, but to be fair, I have not talked about it in many months. Have you thought about, and I know Boulder in general doesn't necessarily like it, but low cost recovery, do you have anybody that's going, like Google's Holiday Lights, you know, and then there's not a cost recovery, it's sponsored and it's paid for, and you know, you don't have to worry about it like that, or, you know, Facebook's North Boulder Park, I don't know, don't know, because you like North Boulder Park, but you know what I mean, like stuff like that, like, is that being
You know, it's-
discussed as an option? or-
Absolutely, and
Okay.
so prior to our budget reduction news last week, we actually had a request that we were planning on submitting for a marketing position that about 20 hours a week would be dedicated towards sponsorships. We certainly look at that. We work with Brian works directly with our Play Foundation for philanthropic opportunities. I think we need to continue to look at that and figure out the best way to leverage that and generate more money. And I think naming rights, and there's definitely some possibilities there. Some communities have done really well with that. We haven't had staff dedicated to going out and doing that, but I think that's certainly something we want to look at in the future.
It would also be great to think, and I'm sure this is already happening with you all, but the whole Sundance Festival and, you know, I don't have a good sense of the vision there, like what are we doing there in terms of naming rights for events and things related to parks and revenue opportunities there? Because that's just a short ways away. And we just certainly don't want to scrimp on investment at this time.
Great questions. I will just say we've already met with the grants office to pursue other external grants. I heard our volunteer services team talking about how do we increase volunteer opportunities where we don't have the staff on board to do the same level of maintenance in the horticulture beds. So we're looking at all of this. Thank you for reiterating we're on the right track.
Are there certain programs that you have to coordinate with other departments that are interconnected that you don't have a lot of leeway with?
I think we interact with every single department in the city in one way or another. Part of this is being a little bit more bold of are there efficiencies that we could have with another department. I'm not going to state any of them out loud tonight, but that is part of the conversation of open space and Parks and Rec used to be one department. There was a separation years ago. Are there still functions that those departments are doing that one department could do more efficiently than two departments? Yeah. We work with everything from utilities, finance, IT, city attorney's office. So maybe all my favorite ones, the internal services. All right, back to Stacy.
Yeah, no, these are great questions, thank you. And stated, we are looking at everything. So the pricing strategy for the fee updates, like I was saying, you know, we did do the market comparisons. We will take all of that data in to consideration as we're going through in pricing. You know, it's certainly our goal to outprice ourselves out of the market. So that is something that we do look at very, very carefully and analyze just to make sure that we are in line. On each of those slides within your packet, you will see a summary on the top. You will find that a lot of the items that we analyze, such as golf courses and others, we really are still below the market. So there's a little bit of room to kind of look at those fees and reevaluate up. But those are all considerations that we do take in with that benchmarking as well. We also do want to, you know, make sure that we have the subsidy to support the age-based discounts, the community benefit recreation, and then the financial aid are all things in the forefront of our minds, just to make sure that we do have very equitable access to our programs too. As well. As we look at a timeline for the work that we have been doing this year, we really launched the program back in January. Over Q1 and Q2, we've done a lot of research and there's been some community engagement that Megan's team has done, but we've done a lot of data analysis. So we have done a lot of costing analysis. We took a look at our 2024 numbers. We wanted to know exactly where our revenue is coming from, how much have we generated, from what buckets of revenue we're getting that funding coming in through our doors. We've also done some in-depth costing just to make sure that we understand how much it is costing the department and expenses to offer those services. As well, we did put together in May more of an extended staff team, and we've conducted several meetings just to bring a voice from across our department, right? We don't want to be making decisions in a silo, but just really to get collaboration within BPR. And then tonight we are bringing this just to the crowd as an overview and let you know where our direction will be going for as we move into Q3. We will be working on some things with timeline to be determined. We'll be finalizing our membership structure and bringing it back to you in Q3, updating our policy for 2026 and developing a communication plan, just things that we have in the works. Wrapping up all of our work within Q4 so that we can hit that Q1 2026 target of having our new structure and fees in effect for that. So any question on the timeline at all? I'm going to flip it over to Megan now, just to kind of go over the membership work that's been being conducted.
Yeah, so as Stacey mentioned, we started really doing a deep dive into the market analysis, especially around our facility access fees. That's pretty normal for us to do every other year. We look at that again and kind of see where are we and where should we be to make sure we're meeting our own cost recovery goals. So this time we really looked at it and looking at the market research, where sometimes we're a little bit different than other organizations. So the last time we really looked at our membership structure was in 2019. We did a large community survey, or a feedback form. I think technically it's not statistically valid, right? And so we've done a couple of things. One, just looking at all the 2024 data from our outdoor pools, pool to reservoir separately, and recreation centers separately. But then also building off of that 2019 feedback, we've asked a couple of key questions to help us really see, well, how do we really look at this a little bit more detailed to help us inform the future. And so keeping this high level, right? If you look at our recreation facilities, currently we are very reliant on our memberships for our revenue at the recreation centers. We do not have the most diverse business model of those locations. So regardless of what we, what our membership structure looks like, one thing that we're already actively working on is our recreation center business plan, which includes some of that diversifying revenue streams. How do we better lean into the fact that the East Boulder Community Center could be a really great place to host weddings? And we're not really doing that really well yet. We could be renting out the basketball gym a little bit more often to youth sports teams or leagues and things like that, while also balancing community benefit to just come in and shoot hoops or play volleyball or whatever else it is, right? And so I think just kind of drawing our attention that the business model at the rec centers is going to be looked at in addition to the membership structure. Additionally, it kind of brought our highlight that our outdoor facilities have very different business models. Specifically, if you look at this, okay, Scott Carpenter Pool currently is also very reliant on memberships or daily entries for its revenue. While Spruce Pool actually has a good deal more rentals and programming, where we don't offer programming at Scott Carpenter Pool, which helps it overall. And the Boulder Reservoir is probably our most diverse business model. And all to say that when you're looking at all of these, the market for these various types of outdoor facilities versus recreation centers versus the Boulder Reservoir are very different. It's not a like for like comparison with market research. And so we also looked at our entries. And so these are just some high level details. Right now, a large amount, 55% plus of all of our entries system wide are heavily discounted. So this means that 45% of our population who's paying full price is having to carry a little bit more of that load. And so we wanted to just kind of really understand how are we distributing the little subsidy that we do across memberships. And right now you can kind of see the high level, just for instance, seniors who purchase passes, not third party, right? The subsidy is $172,000. That's our estimate based on the average cost of entry.
Megan, can you explain what third party means? For those that might not know.
Yes, so third party entry is anyone who accesses our facility through a what it says, third party. So it might be an insurance provider. It's your Silver Sneakers, Silver and Fit, those types of things. So for our third party providers, which are primarily the insurance providers, as example, Silver Sneakers or Renew Active, we negotiate a fee per entry, and we can't really share the details of exactly what that is, but those are currently heavily subsidized entries, above and beyond probably what our intended senior discount of 25% is. And so we're just trying to recognize that that is something that is happening. It doesn't mean that we should or shouldn't be doing it, just it's a data point right now.
Are there employer provided, would an employer be a third party? Do we have this?
So typically, if we are if an employer would be providing a third party thing, and we're under, we wouldn't necessarily have a contract with someone like that, right? They might be getting a public service discount, or they might be buying passes for their employees at a discount that all of their employees would qualify for regardless, right? So everyone who buys a membership who works or live within the city of Boulder gets the resident discount rate, right? And so let's say I'm making this up, this doesn't exist. But let's say Ball Aerospace, which is within city Boulder limits, wanted to buy passes for their participants or their workers. They're not getting a better deal than anyone else currently. So they would just be getting the resident rate on that, and maybe there'd be like a small discount if they were doing punches, right? Based on if you buy a certain number of punches, you get X number of discount based on things that we do for anyone.
It's really the worker in the city.
Yeah, exactly. And same thing, if someone's working at CU Boulder, right, if they were to do something like that, they'd get the public service discount in addition to the resident discount, which is just a 15% discount. But it does, it does add up.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so this is kind of the high level of how people are accessing our facilities and what the actual dollar amount of based on average use. So if we take all of the if we take the whole cost of operating all of our indoor outdoor facilities, which is like $5.8 million, and we divide that by total number of entries, we get $9.46 per visit is the average cost per entry. Or sorry, that's the no, it's
Average recovery.
yeah, that's the average recovery. I don't have any
679 is our average fee that
Current.
we're collecting right now.
currently, yes. So, and what it actually costs if we were to look at a 60% or 67% cost recovery target is we would need to be getting an average recovery rate of 9.46 per visit. So we've kind of identified it in our existing membership structure. We have a 2.67, so $2.67 gap on average recovery of cost per entry for us to be making our cost recovery goal at 67% cost recovery.
How does that compare to national models? Are we in line or?
I would say we're somewhat unique. Many communities either fully subsidize their recreation programs and recreation access or heavily subsidize it. So the way our model works and our rec centers operate are we have a target of 67% cost recovery, which is pretty comparable to the average, but there are many communities that are funded much higher from general funds than we are. And so it's a great question. And I think Megan's highlighted it really well here, and knowing that our true cost of access is over $14 per visit. We got some work to do to catch up, and I think in that last slide, as she was showing the different ways, you'll see monthly passes are our go-to. That's our biggest source of access is through monthly passes, but it is very diversified across the board. And so we're trying to really make sure that we're looking at things holistically. And in 2019, that's the last time we fully looked at it. There was some decisions that were made that we tried out, and quite frankly, and you're going to probably get into this, it's time to look at it again. So, and figure out the best way to make sure that those that can pay are paying.
Well, and we made some assumptions about what it costs to operate a facility, for instance, like Scott Carpenter Pool. It's it now kind of more qualifies almost as a water park versus just your normal hole in the ground pool, right? Like Spruce Pool, where a pool like Spruce Pool, it might be common that people may include that with facility entry, like to a rec center. And as a pool as that has so many amenities like Scott Carpenter, it's actually more common that people would charge for that separately. And it doesn't mean necessarily charge more, it just means charge differently potentially.
Can you go back
As an
to
option.
that a second? No, yeah. So does that mean that if you were to charge everybody coming in $2 and some cents more, then you meet your cost recovery?
So so for instance, this 1411 here, in our existing membership structure where we give, I don't remember the percentage exactly from financial aid, right? They would remain getting 100% free access. Third party would remain at whatever the negotiated contracts are. There would continue to be some kind of gap and, or additional subsidy provided there. The 45% of people that are paying full cost recovery would need to pay that 1411 for us to meet our goals in our existing structure without looking at it or changing anything at all.
We wanted,
It's a $2
if we wanted to
increase.
cover all of our costs of entrance fees, we would have to be charging 1411. But we don't do that from those other charges. We have some program revenue
So the
coming
$2
in.
is just for the 67%.
Correct.
Right. But to your point, although we are unique, everyone should have a cost recovery target, because you have cost to maintain the facility, and then you have people coming in. So is that something that you've looked at? I mean, that's just, should be, I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know.
so we know right now, based on our different revenue streams at different locations, where we are with cost recovery by facility. So, you know, the Boulder Reservoir that has a very diverse revenue structure,
Mhm.
it is, you know, meeting its cost recovery targets, right?
Right.
And the East Boulder Community Center actually, because it has so much more programming spaces and programs that operate out of there, is doing better at cost recovery, even though the North Boulder Rec Center has way more entrants. But because the North Boulder Rec Center relies 89% on memberships for its revenue, because there's not a lot of rental space, there's not a lot of other things that we do there except allow people to come in and use the space, right? That all plays into it having a slightly lower. I would say, I think the North Boulder Rec Center is at about 67% cost recovery, so it's probably meeting it, but we could be doing it in a smarter way.
I'm hearing a lot of requests for benchmarking. We did just receive the NRPA benchmarking data for 2024 that compares us to Colorado agencies and then nationally cities between 100 and 150,000. So we'll bring that back next month. It talks about earned revenue, cost recovery percentages, expenses per staff. So we can bring that back.
And I'm gonna go with a question from the audience real quick. Bernie sent some questions that I'd be remiss not to ask, because he would like to have an answer while he watches, after his question. His question on this is, on the reservoir fees, it is my personal opinion that Boulder should be moving away from allowing motorized recreation on the reservoir, and rather than an experience of body of water is too small to accommodate the existing uses, and that allowing water skiing and motorized recreation is not consistent with the city's climate goals. With that in mind, has there been any discussion of using the fee structure to disincentivize motorized boating? And he recognizes that this opinion may not be universally held.
Yep, great question. Certainly, we've had that conversation, and we have had some town hall meetings over at the reservoir with users of the reservoir, heavy users. I think what we hope to do is look at the fee schedule this year for the reservoir and the fee structure for the reservoir for access. We're looking at that, and that'll come back to you later this summer as well. As far as disincentivizing boating usage, I think that would be something that would be determined based on feedback from the community, and probably in the next 2 to 3 years, we'd like to do a new master plan for that site that would really help us to identify program priorities and what it could potentially look like. We've had the conversation, is it, you know, more of a natural area out of the reservoir, or is it a fun park with, you know, RV parking and all kinds of things? And so the future of that reservoir and what the priorities are out there really needs to have a high level of community engagement. And I think the voting is included with that.
And all to say is, through our market research, I think we've identified that we want to bring you some levers or some things that we can kind of talk through and see how do we want to move forward here. We certainly, one of those options will be, let's keep it the status quo, and we'll give you some numbers of what new fees would need to look like if we change nothing. But then we want to give you a little bit more information, you know, for instance, should the Boulder Reservoir be able to be accessed without having access to everything, right? It's less expensive to operate some of the recreation centers than it is to operate specifically Scott Carpenter or the Boulder Reservoir. Some of our outdoor facilities where chemicals have gone really up, or staffing costs have grown, or we have ANS to deal with. Things change and the markets for those things change. And so certainly I think we know from our community that some kind of premier pass that includes everything that meets our cost recovery target should probably still be an option. Right? And could it be more affordable if you really are someone who's, these are examples, this is nothing is concrete, we'll give you levers to look at. You know, could it be more affordable and could we avoid some additional fee increases by separating out, say, the rec center? And the person who really does just come to the North Boulder Rec Center to scan their pass and use the weight room, do they need to be paying the same fee for the person who is using that and the reservoir and the outdoor pools? I don't know. So we'll come up with some levers. We're hoping to come back in July with just a little bit more information, so that you can help give us some direction, additional direction for the community. And at the same time, we'll present some of the data that we collected through the feedback forms that were out in May, along with some of the historical feedback that we had in 2019 to kind of help say, this is what we've heard from the community historically.
Because July is going to be such an important discussion for us, is it possible we could get some of this information sooner than like the weekend before?
Yeah, I think, I don't know how quickly we'll need to make a final decision on the fee structure. I think
Okay.
there's some time there.
Oh, okay.
What I will say is any structure that we implement, any changes that we implement to our fees, we're going to create a structure or propose a structure to you that hits our current revenue targets or exceeds. We would never provide a structure that says we're gonna lose more money on a certain area. So I think in approving the budget and what Jackson needs from you in July, we can still work on refining this. And then we're gonna wanna do a high level of community engagement, at least to inform, probably in November and December to make sure the public understands what's happening. So this is also going to align with our implementation of our new recreation management software. And so we're feeling like we've got some time, and I will say that things have changed a lot since 2019, right? And so our costs have changed for facilities, but Megan also mentioned, you know, we weren't operating Scott Carpenter at the time, and it cost a lot more to operate than we thought it was going to. And the reservoir with the ANS, we don't know what we're gonna run into with Eurasian water milfoil and the cost of that mitigation. And so I think we're just trying to figure out some of that flexibility. And then also with the fiscally constrained environment, I think there's a real strong need to look at ways to be more creative to generate additional resources.
And just referring back to the timeline, we'll be finalizing the membership structure in Q3, so you all do have some time.
I see.
We're
Okay,
just
sorry.
really bringing some ideas and stuff, nothing finalized or this is set in stone for you to vote on in July. It's just
To set us in the right
Direction.
direction,
Yeah.
because we do have more work to do.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
No, I just want to start blazing that trail.
And I'll pass it back to Stacy.
Oh, yeah, sure. Are there any questions on the membership work before I wrap it up here? Okay, so I'm just gonna go over just 3 other areas that the PEB should be aware of that we are looking at for 26 fee policy updates. The first is the Flatirons Golf Course. We did do a comprehensive market study. That is in your package right now. What we found is that comparisons for 9 holes of play are comparable to market average. The course is still pretty much below our competition for 18 holes. So we will be looking at that, as well as, you know, all the different components that bring in revenue at a golf course there. We'll look at some access options. Does it even make sense for value passes? A lot of the courses that we looked at in the market are going away from the value pass and really going more to a punch pass option, is what we found. So that was pretty interesting. So we will be working with the staff out at the golf course really have their pulse on this, just to try to develop that there. The next one is the contracted programming, rentals, and commercial use. We are putting together a 2026 community access framework, which will kind of steer us in the direction in progressing those areas and seeing what fees we can do in doing that market rate comparison. We did find that our field rental rates are pretty much in line or lower than surrounding municipalities. We are much lower looking at the school district and CU, which sits in our backyard too. So just kind of taking a look and making sure that we're structured, you know, correctly in some areas and not so much in others, but just diving into deep. And then we'll be evaluating any alternative revenue options out there. How are we charging for things? Are we missing anything? Are our competitors charging a little bit differently? BVSD does have a lot of commercial use fees that they do put in. They also put it in on numbers a little bit differently. So just really taking a deep dive in all of that information. And then the last thing would be court access fees. So the 2024 court system plan will help us guide this fee development in looking at, you know, market comparatives. We did find, I think the biggest glaring difference was that a lot of other municipalities have different tennis and pickleball rates, which I know came out in the study. So really just kind of looking at that and deciding what those fees will be. Right now, they're looking for the courts. So that is all TBD as we go through this work over the next several months. These are our other really big three areas of focus.
Any questions on these memberships?
If you don't mind, there was one other question for Murray that I just want to jump back to just one second and ask. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. He asked on the fee policy, can you tell us how much profit BPR is able to derive from commercial uses of parks, camps, yoga classes, etc.? Cost recovery is listed at 100% plus, and he's wondering what the plus is doing for the budget. Asking because presumably the operators of those enterprises are deriving profit by using city facilities.
I'm happy to take that one. We currently have a commercial use program that was a pilot developed in 2012. That is what the community access framework is trying to transition towards. I can tell you the cost recovery right now is in the single digits for some of our groups, whereas other groups it's significantly higher. The difficulty we're having is how do we phase this in for a group that hasn't historically paid full cost recovery, but because we have a pilot program that never graduated into an ongoing program, the intention is to get them closer towards full cost recovery. It may be a phased-in approach that it takes several years to get there, but right now the answer is very little full cost recovery. Okay. Mark and I are going to tag team CIP. This is your third touch with it. Just a reminder, we have the three different categorizations. Asset management is really taking care of our existing assets. Parks and recreation facilities is more planning for those larger refreshes, larger projects. And then system planning is looking 5 to 7 years in advance of what are the trends, what do we need to be doing. Just a reminder, 5 years, $50,000 or more. I sound like a broken record. Once again, as we're going through our ask for funding and budget reductions, we will be looking at CIP as well. Back to Scott's point, this is really one-time funding that's not necessarily ongoing, and there are implications as far as not investing in your assets and taking care of what you have, which is a key theme from the 22 department plan. So we plan to really focus on this very closely, and let's be strategic, not reduce every project by 5%. We know that that won't cover the gap. Asset management, starting in 21, we listed out these 10 or 12 categories of assets. We have added more categories over time, and I think that we finally have enough information where we are going to increase or decrease these based on what our actual spend has been. We have spent a lot of money on courts over the last 3 years, and as a result, the amount that we're spending on courts on a go-forward basis will likely decrease. just because there was so much deferred maintenance and conversion to post-tension concrete. Yeah.
I just find that, that's that exciting one, isn't it? Because with the new board, obviously this is where I'm from. But Jackson and I worked together on a existing plan, the cost and things, and although it's 400 at the moment, this is to come to post-pension, which is a 50-year lifespan, as opposed to our existing cost of 25 years. Feels like we're investing more money, but over the course of 50 years, instead of investing in 295,000, sorry, 265,000 a year, investing 92,000 a year. So over 50 years, we get a reduction. And that's to Jackson's point then, that's why you see that over the period down to about 100,000.
When does that go down? What was the time frame again?
We haven't actually got the time frame.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just it's a really nice way of showing how we're investing in the future. now.
The other thing I'll just call out is when we come back to you next month, we will likely shift some of these asset management categories from asset management into a named park project. If we are touching the bathroom, if we're touching the shade shelter, if we're redoing a parking lot, we may take this money and really put all of our eggs in one basket for that park refresh that year. Just recognizing that there are assets there. So you may see certain years where we've backed out the asset management. That means it's going towards a specific park project, and we're just making that park project whole. It's much easier to track from the finance side. It's much easier for you all to convey to the public as far as, oh, this money is actually what it costs to work on North Boulder Park, instead of you have to look at the asset management for shelters and bathrooms and parking lots and meeting.
Is this, just, I apologize if you answered it, but this is like roughly $3 million. What is our usual annual?
I need to jump ahead.
Okay. sorry.
Asset management, we have an average budget of 2.4 million, parks facilities 2.6 million, urban forestry 500,000, system planning just under 200,000. And then CCRS, we do have a whole lot of money at 65 million that we really back that out because that achieves action and vision level. But we keep it slightly separate.
You know, I mean, if I just add that when you see the parks and recreation facilities, it's not like creating a bunch of new stuff. It's taking care of what we got. So to Jackson's point, we're creating efficiency and like mobilization fees and things like that. But pull some of the individual assets into the park.
So is 2.4 about for asset and just asset management's, I'm just curious about that line specifically. That's about normal, like that's a normal cost for asset management?
We're underfunded significantly.
So what would you like asset management to look like?
I need to go back to the department plan. I believe we wanted it at 4% of CRV.
Yeah, to be honest, if it was ideal, it'd be somewhere in the 10 million mark. It's not so much the management of the assets, because the commission, it's the investment in the life cycle cost of the place. So not having the placement life cycle is what is in the for instance, what about 20 areas that are past their life cycle, so we're trying to keep them in good condition, but it's costing more and more. That's the fault that you see the bigger numbers.
22 department plan said 7.5 million, just accounting for inflation, Mark's number of 10 million, ballpark,
Yeah.
close.
Okay.
And obviously we need staffing to support that if we increased it, so it's
Sure,
also
right.
very careful.
I'm just gonna finish on this slide first and then we'll hop back. So as Mark mentioned, park and recreation facilities is really those park refreshes. It's not a new park. We did break out urban forestry management just because there is the urban forest strategic plan. This really addresses the capital nature of trees. Trees are viewed as a appreciating asset. They increase in value over time. And then system planning are really those plans that help guide the next 5 to 7 years. This includes everything from department plan that's gotten way too much love, to a natural land system plan, to the future of recreation or the future of parks are different examples. All right, we'll jump back through, currently 26 projects are listed on the screen. You've heard about these before. This is the area where we need to really address staff capacity and budget, just with the cost escalation and increases. We're going to be looking at all of these projects and we'll come back with a better recommendation. It may mean that we're decreasing funds in one project to fund another. We may delay a project. We may say this is no longer a priority. It goes to the unfunded list. So those are all realistic options I want you to be aware of, which you'll hear next week. As we're going through this, the memo really identified, we're looking at the perk score, we're looking at visitation data, we're looking at the asset quality. So there's a lot of different metrics that go into it. And last month or the month before, Mark shared the dashboard that we're using to help guide that decision.
Can I ask a question, Jason?
Yeah.
For the Tom Watson pickleball at 2.025, is that allocation or budget adjustment by the city council of the 925,000, does that affect that at all? Reduce that number?
No, this 2.025 is exactly what we have in the budget currently. I will say quotes are coming in significantly higher than this, that we will either need to design engineer down. There is a fundraising campaign that Playboulder is leading right now as part of their placemaking. We could look for grants. Mark will give me some other options.
Yeah, because it's a presentation later. No, it's great. I give you 20 plus. You'll see some, as Jackson's pointing out, I would have to think about phasing.
All right, park projects, you've seen all of these before. We just want to be very transparent that this is a lot for the capacity of the planning team. So you will hear more about some of the phasing of this when we come back to you next month as part of our opportunities to find reductions, but also align community expectations with what our staff capacity truly is. And I wouldn't say it's just our staff capacity, it's our contractors, it's getting through permitting. What we used to think was a year-long project is now probably 2 years to do the full life cycle of a perk refresh. I say this is the non-planner in the room, so it's easy for me to look at the numbers. And then I just want to call out, there's no intention to take away any funding from the CCRS projects. All 3 projects were named when the ballot went to the voters in 22. The civic area refresh, we currently have about $19 million for. Pearl Street Mall is a mix of different funding. This will come back to you as Jenny asked earlier. And then the East Boulder Community Center, we're working with facilities on that project, and you heard a little bit about it from Darren last month. All right, so that gets us to the total. Across everything, we have about $100 million in our CIP over the next 6 years. This is part of the area where we will be looking for targeted reductions, not peanut butter approach where we just reduce everything. So that's where we will talk through, can our construction team do more work and save 90% of the cost of what a nature play consultant group would do? Can we change the sequencing and scheduling? So all of this will be brought back to you next month with some recommendations here. This is really just a ballpark number as far as what was included in the budget that's already approved, so you're aware of the types of projects in CIP. Any questions on CIP? Okay. I think we've gotten answers to a lot of these throughout. These were the questions that were included in the packet. I'm happy to read them off or leave them up here to see if you all have any other thoughts you wanted to share with us.
I have one other question. And this is, it's a budget line item that I found throughout, and that is this consulting, the consultants. And it's a pretty big citywide line item. So I was wondering, full disclosure, I'm a professional, I'm an actual consultant. So what I'm saying, like, I feel like the city has really knowledgeable employees. Is the consulting required, or do you just prefer? I just wonder why it's such a large line item in the budget overall.
I'm happy to answer that. And if you have a project of, let's just say it's 100,000 numbers, do you see a consultant charge, construction project? The consultant charge somewhere between 8,000 to 20,000. Complexity. There's a couple of things there. We are actually we did look at currently increasing the staffing within planning. To actually do what you'll see, because we've seen a shift back to where those percentages were then. Therefore, fact two of the staff are coming on board to help support more in-house construction design. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
There is always going to be a factor. Let's take, say, Tremos Park, the civic area. We need to do a ton of CAD drawings, maybe 300 sheets. That requires a bunch of folks. Let's get all the things to do in CAD drawings. We're never going to have that bench strength.
Okay.
team. So we do have to rely on consultants for that. And what we did recently, for example, was for two projects where the percentage was coming in around 80, we got it actually down to 15%. So we've been really careful there, and that saves somewhere between $2,000. So we're trying our best to reduce that cost.
That's great.
It's a hard one.
I know.
And I will say that Mark's the easy one to pick on. We do have consultants across the department.
Yeah.
Some of our tree contractors are contracted, not necessarily
Not
consultants,
contractors, so
but
much consultants,
Yeah.
like the people that come in and like just draw stuff on a piece of paper.
I will say,
Yeah. Not the guys that actually cut down the trees, right?
some,
And again, like I'm
Yeah.
super familiar with the consulting industry. I just was wondering how it could be better utilized in the city. I think that was a perfect explanation.
sometimes it is required by another department. So implementing our new recreation management software, we were required by IT and city manager's office to have a consultant. The nice thing is, term limited, we don't have an ongoing employee, very much an expertise that we don't have in-house. That we look at that, and then I will just highlight anything that's over $50,000. We typically run through a full RFP process, so we do get responses. We aren't required to go with the lowest bidder, but we go with the most responsible bidder. That we really are doing our research and verifying we are getting the best cost.
Otherwise, I think, does anybody have any specific answers, or do you feel like there's anything on that? I think we did pretty good feedback so far. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we also agree with some of the approaches that you laid out. So for instance, not a peanut butter approach, not cutting everything, but being very strategic about where it makes sense. And also using it as an opportunity to identify cost savings that will benefit us years down the line versus something that we can temporarily pause, but sets us up for increasing costs in future years. Okay.
Great. Thank you for the marathon.
No, that was great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for putting all that together for us in 5 days. That was really, really,
Stacy gets the credit here, as does Megan. Thank you both.
we appreciate all the information for sure. Next, we're moving on to matters from the department, I believe. Tom Watson, that we're talking about from.
Yes, so Mark has some exciting news to share and has made some really good progress on the Tom Watson court. So Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Doug. So first off, I'll just do an introduction, there's an update on the project. Christoph Fischer, on the project manager. That we come back to his home country, Austria, with his family. And so we've asked Matt Hilber, who is our senior asset manager, to pick up this project now. And so that's the leadership. So Matt, you are, I think you're online tonight, is that right? So I'll do the presentation tonight. That's basically the agenda. Just go through why we do the project, what's the program, get into some details on the layouts, and then talk about the schedule, that discussion Michael was earlier about what's funded, what's not funded, how we think about that, and then some questions.
First, are you able to promote Matt? Is he online?
Yes, I am.
Perfect.
Matt, you just want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Matt Pilger. I joined the planning design team back last June. Prior to that, I was one of our recreation center managers for 5 years and have really worked in Parks and Recreation about 15, 20 years now. So excited to be joining the team and being able to help over on this Tom Watson project, which really just aligns with a lot of the work I'm doing within asset management already. So it was kind of a easy transition when we heard Christoph was leaving. So yeah.
Experience and already, he's up and running already, which makes it fantastic. So, Tom Watson, there's two things I want to say here. Initially, we were trying to move ahead in 2025 with this East Boulder Community Park to advance pickleball courts and update tennis courts. We are working in an area that's somewhat complex, quite complex with the code, especially related to annexation required in that area. And that's slowed the project down tonight. So, working with Ali and a few other folk, the next one on the list was Tom Watson. And obviously, we want to get the system. So the call system plan is that there's the number 2 site for you to use. So we said, well, let's advance it. And the goal in the call system plan was get us to 22 courts dedicated for pickleball by 2026. So at the moment, we said based upon capacity and land restrictions, etc., we can actually get 12 courts down. So let's give that a shot. When we, of course, like any park, when you dive into it, you start to uncover a few little things that are going on, and you're like, oh, this isn't quite working. So on the left, you'll see with the pickleball courts, some pretty typical stuff, like in fencing, some small shade planners. We'll get concrete walkways, pedestrian lighting, access those courts, some new trees and plantings in relation to screening, introduction, etc. And as we looked at it, we recognized Tom Watson also needs a few things. Site furnishings. We do have food trucks use the site somewhat randomly. Can we get a better food truck plaza? And I know we hear the term chicken and pickle, which is copyrighted, so I won't use that term. But it's the idea of making it more of a social event along with that. We did decide that we can reserve the basketball court, and again, that's a good example that you mentioned earlier with asset management system, because frankly, the mobilization of the company doing basketball courts and the pickleball courts makes it a lot cheaper at once. And the word in poor condition or in terrible condition. And then the things just like we know we have to take out the area that's there that's in poor condition and it has some safety issues, which we're actually managing this week. And so we replace it, and at this point, though, that will be more phase 2, where we just get the fencing and potentially. And then we'll have to look at temporary restrooms, and I'll explain that in the next slide. So what you see here is the concept design for phase 1 and 2. Everything's labeled on there, so you get a sense of the site. B is where the 12 pickleball courts will go. E is where existing tennis courts are, and I is those basketball courts. F is where we'll be able to put in an area for the nature play, but not quite get into developing what that is in phase 1. And then you see where C is, that's the future plaza. The bathroom would approximately is that white structure just to the right of C. We have to demo the existing bathroom. And that's been closed, I'm actually not sure how many years, 2 years, 3 years, it's been closed, and it's been on the list as a CIP asset management to replace. So this is a great example again, combining that at the same time. Possible not one bathrooms, so that's why we'll be doing temporary bathrooms in phase 1.
What is forest? It's D.
Yeah, it's just basically it's a fancy term for an area where you're going to have shade to hang out. Sometimes the designers get that.
And most of those, Mark, most of those trees are already existing in that area, and so it's a great way to continue utilizing that natural space in the area.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, please chip in, Matt, as we go through this. Here you see, as I zoom in a bit, here's what we've got for phase 1. It's that dashed outline, which I've just explained, where we get most of the concrete done for the sidewalks and the main corridors. You'll see there that part of this is not just thinking about pickleball, we're trying to help utilize the basketball and the tennis courts for this sort of event space in the middle and the food trucks. So all 3 types of sports get equal fair play with the way it gets activated. Matt actually has been incredibly helpful with his knowledge on the design of the pickleball courts, especially in terms of things like making sure there's gates on either sides, which I'll be honest, Christoph and I had forgot about, to make sure people aren't walking across courts and people enter. So it's nice having Matt's knowledge on the ground to help make these things work. Is there anything else you'd add to that, Matt?
No, I think we're good.
And just, yeah, there you see just another zoom in of the draft layout, and you can see how, for instance, critical of things like shade structures. And we've seen these go on the ground, like in Nevada and Bloomfield, so we've been able to look at some of the latest design work that's gone on with the massively growing sport and take a look at some of the successes that have occurred. So we're trying to do that to make sure we get the best we can. Here's the schedule for the project. This is a good example where I think our team is up and running and we're able to actually put something on the ground within roughly 12 months, which is very exciting to see. We're in green in the middle part, we're literally about to advance the construction drawings and move into negotiations for contracts. We have an existing contractor through what's called source law contracts, so that's not technically a bidding. It's where we can bring on board through an ongoing feedback contract, and it actually creates huge value for money because the rate sheets are already set. The goal is that round about November, we should have construction done, hopefully early November, and then we'll probably spend a month sprucing things up, just because when the contractor leaves the site, there's often quite a bit of work to do. And one of the things Matt and our Pops-Up folks have looked at, again, to saving them, is salvaging, like for instance, existing benches, trash cans, etc., that are in good condition, and make sure they're reusable. Just not a huge cost saving, but it all helps. So the goal that we get a soft opening, hopefully in December. I'll put a caveat on that in a second. It's something like so then you see phase 2. That first sentence is not the best one I've ever written, but hopefully it makes sense. It's kind of like a British sentence that just goes on forever. But the main point I'm trying to make here is phase 2 for 2026. We have restroom funded and we are able to resurface the parking of the road. There's a good time. Coming in during 25 will also itself, so it's nice actually. Yes. Here you see phase 2, which is unfunded. Things like play area replacements, walking trail improvements, things like furnishings, additional tree shrubs and landscaping. We'll be potentially working with Clay Boulder and Brian funding campaign to see if we can get this additional work funded through that campaign. But basically focus on the sort of critical needs. I'm hopeful with some of the work we've been doing that we talked about earlier. The specific area and testing area will be able to field process.
What's the dollar amount of that? What's the dollar amount of that?
I would say approximately at this point somewhere, I'm going to just give you the back of the envelope number at 500,000 to 600,000.
Lighting, isn't that kind of a critical thing? Or no? Do these sports, I'm not a pickleball player, but do sports using that?
No, the cold lighting take care of this is other lighting in the fall.
Ah, okay.
They need the second.
I will say, very excited to see the lighting in the, even for the pickleball courts, that's not a given. There's a lot of pickleball courts that don't have lighting, which is really challenging. So,
I appreciate that. You're right.
it's true.
Especially if this, it's at 12 allow also virtual tournaments, which we will.
Which is more revenue opportunity, right? Like if you can extend.
Yeah. Because otherwise it's done, like,
Right.
whatever, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock.
Right, and then do pickleballers play during the winter? Or?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
we do.
We
Okay.
actually spoke to Nevada courts and they've had to put a gate up because people were arriving at 5 AM and they made us road. Which they often said, Tom Watson won't have that problem. So, but I'll leave it up to Megan and Brian to think about it.
Do they ever have tents for like keeping the place, the courts warm for winter?
I haven't seen that, but I mean, I think that's the nice thing about the climate in Boulder is like you can get those days where, you know, it's
Winter, but it's sunny.
yeah, and I mean, there's days where it gets warm enough and you're just shoveling the snow off the courts you can play.
Oh, okay.
As part of the court system plan too, we did do quite a bit of community engagement, and there was a desire for indoor, both pickleball and tennis courts. And we certainly looked at indoor courts and the cost of those. And there was a lot of challenges to make it work financially.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
It's surprisingly expensive, but I think $40 to $20 million for 6 tennis courts, which is up to 20 million. Expensive. And we frankly didn't pay any. Okay, so tonight, obviously here, hopefully soft opening. We actually just today got an asbestos finding in the closed back room, in which way it's not open. So that might delay the project slightly, but we do not that occurs. Obviously, phase 2, funding what we can from the. So there's 3 questions there. So.
Oh, I have on your plan, on the picture that you have this. Which is 63rd running,
I almost want to stand away to the left.
is it running this, so it's like this way? It's not this way, right?
Yeah, so Cook Lake and Reservoirs on the other side.
Okay. And then is there a pond
Yes,
in the back?
actually to the south.
No, Coot Lake on the other side of
There's a
63rd.
retention pond.
A retention, a little pond,
Yeah, just to the south of the,
and that'll stay.
yes.
Okay, great. And then Bernie asks, looks great, looks like it will add a lot for our pickleball community to enjoy. I think there's an opportunity to improve bike access to the park with an entrance at the southern end of the property where the existing reservoir path leads to 63rd Street. With an entrance to the park at the location and improved crossing that helps cyclists, pedestrians be visible to vehicles coming up the grade from the south, we can easily tie the park into existing bike path and prevent people on bikes from having to ride on 63rd Street. Is this something that can be added to the plan? If additional funds are needed, could they become part of a play camp? This might require changes to the nature play.
Absolutely, because that is phase 2. On the ground this year, so I'll definitely make sure we get those notes incorporated. Thanks, Bernie. We've heard that before, and bikers, quite a lot of bikers use this park. It's a great place to set off on the
Because it also connects like to a Boulder West too, so it's kind of nice.
And I'll just add in there too, some of the analysis that's going in that will go into phase 2 is specifically the fitness loop that kind of goes around that isn't being touched. But with that, we also have access to Strava Metro data, which specifically says that, right? That, yeah, it's a heavily used biking area. And so we were able to actually see kind of some of those heat maps and exactly probably what Bernie's kind of speaking to. And I think that just goes into the full analysis of what we're looking at within the parks for each site.
Mark, just since I'm new here, how does the priorities of the phase 2 place? Can you just do, say, for example, you want to, for 1 year, just do lighting, wayfinding, and then follow it up later with something else that's second on the list, or you have to do all of those within a 1 year, 2 year period?
No, it's a great question, especially as the message you heard tonight. Staff capacity, we like to do it in one job block just because of all the efficiency. And in this case, though, this is a course focused project, so we do know that it's the priority. Things like classrooms are essentials. We will be really careful.
Questions on Tom Nelson? I'll also say, I just think this is a really big win. I think this park is very underutilized. I was there actually on Father's Day, and it was just so funny to see all the activity happening at Coot Lake and not a lot of activity happening Town Watson. So I think, you know, great for the pickleball community, but also this could be a way to really revitalize this park and probably bring in people for all kinds of recreation activities. And right now, I think it's just, it looks a little sad. It's just not really appealing to a broad, you know, audience.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, anything else? Okay, thanks, everybody. Thank you so much, Mark, for that presentation. Thanks for getting that one up and running so quickly. That's super exciting. All right, next we have matters from the board. This portion of the meeting is for members of the board to report on PREB's annual work plan. Goal of each member: attending 2 or more parks and recreation related community activities per month, promoting parks and recreation through social media, attending site tours, and supporting the department's partnership initiatives. What items would board members like to report on at this time? We'll start. That's okay. Okay. Two things. First, is there any news on getting our new person, our last crab member?
I believe city council will be doing that in August. They're about to go on a hiatus there for the summer, and then in the August meeting, someone would be nominated from them, and that means probably September before we have someone joining. Yes.
Okay, so that's still on the schedule, right?
Yes.
Wonderful. And then this is from Bernie. The mall was the scene of a violent attack on June 1st. Was BPR involved at all in the immediate incident or aftermath? He's especially wondering if our rangers or bathroom attendants were present at the time of the attack, and if they have received any support in managing the impact of proximity to the incident. Were there any other BPR staff involved or impacted? Will the incident lead to any changes to the permitting process or security procedures for special events going forward? But I did reach out to Scott right afterwards just to make sure, and Ally, just to make sure that everything was okay with the department, and they were okay.
Yeah, obviously a really tragic incident that occurred. Our urban rangers were not on site and were not dispatched to respond. And so they were certainly on the radio and in the loop as to what was happening. We also did not have any park staff on site. It was the weekend, and so our staff were not impacted directly from the event. However, certainly we had a lot of follow-up conversations, offered additional services to anybody that had concerns or wanted to speak with someone. But it's, yeah, it hit really close to home. As y'all know, Pearl Street is considered a park, and it's one of our spaces that we really take a lot of pride in, and that's, it was very disappointing that occurred, and we're going to continue to look at ways to work with our PD and the rest of other departments to try and minimize those type of risks.
I think that question he asked about permitting is interesting. Will the incident lead to any changes to the permitting process or security procedures for any special events going forward? Would that come out of parks or planning?
You know, that's a great question. Yeah, I think it's more of a community vitality.
Okay. So we'll follow up with them on that question. No, that's not. This is staff. And other than that, for me, Civic Center looked amazing. I really enjoyed attending that event. Thank you so much. And I didn't mean to take your thunder when I asked the question. It was just that Scott told me all about the cost savings when I was there. So
We'll take any compliments.
okay. It was lovely. Thank you for the name tags also for everybody. That's really great. Anything else from anybody on park activity?
I was wondering if anybody responded to Mr. O'Rourke's email. Best board member, best board meeting, about an update on the Parks and Rec plan for preservation, historic sites.
I spoke to Mr. O'Rourke last week, and he was going to speak more about it.
I think I'm gonna take them up on that. Visit some of the sites. It sounds pretty interesting. And I know this is super challenging for you guys in the next couple of weeks, so I really appreciate all the work, especially getting us ready for this to come. So, thank
I'm just curious, where are all the forestry trees for that? pop-up store? We have the pop-ups, no?
Which is 200 Pearl Street.
Anyone else? I attended the meet and greet. It was awesome.
Very cool.
It was really fun.
What was it?
Goats are
Oh.
hired.
Yes, okay.
They're hired at the Harlan Flats Park to eat away. Get rid of weeds, and it's very fun. See them, feed them, and
I know it's not parks, but it's amazing to see the cows by the fire mitigation.
All right. If there's nothing else on Fred Manners, then next board meeting is July.
You're putting me on the spot real quick. Let me look.
July 28th, okay, and it'll be good stuff then. All right, if there's no further business for the crowd tonight, then the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for all of your hard work. Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. It's all right, it's so close.